Hey, welcome back to the channel. This is Dave with Alum House Sound, and today we're going to be talking about effects. I've had a lot of questions recently about the difference between insert effects or send and return effects and how they really work and how to best utilize those. So maybe you've been practicing on the DAW, maybe you've been following through the process of learning how to mix using a DAW. How do you practice at home? I'll link that video here that you can check that out after this. I'll also put it down in the description with the playlist that you can follow along there at home. But before we dive into the console, I want to give a little bit of education around the difference between an insert effect and a send and return effect. And then we'll jump onto the X32. We'll look at how those things are set up, and I'll even wrap up with some tips and tricks for you that might help your mix be a little bit easier to do every week. All right, so let's dive into these differences of effects. So we've got our trusty whiteboard here, or white piece of paper, and there's two main styles of effects. All right, first we're going to talk about insert effects. And then next we'll talk about what I call send and return effects. There's probably some more official name for it, but that's what I call them because that's what they do. But an insert effect is this. You have a signal coming in, let's say from an XLR, coming into your console. And before it goes to your fader over here, you have the ability to insert an effect. Now, in the old days, I'll show you a picture here. The consoles on the back have something that says INS. That's for insert. You would use a cable that looks like this, which gives you the ability to have a mono signal going out and then a mono signal returning. Now, we use these for much different purposes nowadays, but this is what they were designed for. You would stick one end in and you would have the tip in the ring, and one would send, one would return, and it would return on that same channel. So back here, this is returning on the same channel. Now, on most digital consoles, what we have the ability for is a compressor. A compressor is a mono effect in this case. And so we're going to have the mono signal come in. It would go to a compressor. Then it would go to the fader. Now also, many times nowadays, we have an EQ that's also inserted in our channel strip. And then it would go to the fader. Now you have the ability on these digital consoles, especially the X32 that I do a lot of videos on, to bring in a different effect. Let's say it's a de-esser, which is a specific type of compressor for removing S's, thus the de-esser. So if you have somebody that talks with a super heavy S, you can use this. It's a compressor that's at specific frequencies. Look up a de-esser. They're really helpful and handy. Maybe you've got a bass guitar or an electric guitar, and you need to add some sort of an amp simulation, something that has some drive to it. You could do that with an insert effect, and you can then choose where this insert effect goes, whether it's here. In our case on the X32, you can decide if it's before these other onboard effects, the compressor and the EQ, or you can do it after the compressor and EQ. Side note, on our channel strip on the X32, you can also decide which of these happens first, the compressor or EQ. That's not the discussion for today, but you've got the ability here to take whatever insert effects you want to do, and you can insert them before the compressor and EQ, or you can do it after. So in the scenario with an amp or a drive, you might want to do that afterwards, because if you push it up here, you might be compressing or EQing out some of the sound that you're looking for here. However, a de-esser, typically I run a de-esser first, because then I am EQing after the de-esser. I don't want to EQ out the S's before I let this insert effect actually work. So this is all happening though before we hit up to your fader here that allows you to move up and down. And so this also impacts everything that happens in your other chains. So if we use a reverb, then this whole signal is going to be sent to the reverb. If we use a delay, all of this stuff is going to be sent to the delay. Be wise about what you use here because it will hit everything that is downstream from this input. All right, a send and return. This is where we take a bus of some sort and we group certain instruments. Let's say it's a drum bus, and we want our drums to go to a reverb. So we would put all of our drums, so maybe not kick, but snare, tom 1, tom 2, okay, floor tom. We take all of these instruments, we group them together on a bus, and then they get sent out. So this is mono over here. The bus is mono. Typically, I know you can do a stereo pair of 2 buses, but let's use the example of the way that most of these consoles are set up. You have a mono input. It's sending out to this reverb, and then the reverb is going to return a left and a right channel, and I'm going to put the return over here. All right, so it's returning a left and a right channel. Now with this, we have the benefit of having some faders here, okay? But these have to return on 2 channels of your console. So it's going to send out, and then it's going to have a stereo return. It's very similar to what we looked at over here. However, you're going to be returning a stereo signal, which is going to be coming in into 2 channels in your console. This one goes out mono and comes back on the same channel, which is mono. This one goes out mono and then comes back stereo. We're going to look at this in the console in a minute, but this difference between send and return effects versus insert effects, when we were in the analog world, this made a lot more sense because we had to physically plug cables in. We had to route things out of a bus into, sometimes it was into a compressor and then into a reverb, or into a reverb, maybe into a delay and then a reverb and then back into the console. And this just gives you the ability to adjust how much of that reverb comes into your mix. Also, because we deal with live streaming a lot, this determines if this reverb or effect is going into your house, into your live stream, one or the other. You get to choose. But let's dive into the console now and see how all of this stuff is set up in the console. All right, so up here on the console, if we hit the Effects tab, then it brings up, you see 4 on the left and 4 on the right, different effects, effects 1 through 8. This is the home screen. You can use the arrows down here to be able to select between the individual effects, as you can see the tabs have above there. You could also use this bottom right encoder knob, and it highlights as you twist it. It's going to highlight the effect that you're looking for. Then if you push it, it will automatically jump to that effect that allows you to make those changes. It also now becomes a return to home button, so we can return back to the effects home. So on the left-hand side here, these are the effects returns. These by default are set up as send and return effects. You can change that on this console to be an insert effect, to have a bunch of insert effects, but only these 4 can be used as send and return. These are pre-mapped to your buses, 13, 14, 15, 16. Again, you can change those as well if you would like. So let's look at what we've got here. Bus 13, you would just use these encoders if you wanted to change it. You can see that, I can switch this between any buses or go all the way back and make it an insert. But again, with buses, we're preset at bus 13 on this first one. And so we would build a mix using sends on fader, usually is the easiest thing to do. You would build a mix just like a monitor mix, just like a live stream mix, any auxiliary mix that you've built where you would set levels of each individual input goes into that bus. Then the bus sends that mix into this effect. So for this one, we'll just take a look at it. This is my vintage reverb. I love this reverb. It's got a great sound to it. So this one is going to be coming in. Some little things up here you can see left and right are being matched in terms of all of their settings. And then you can send it back out. And this actually returns on the console. We'll get to that in just a second. But this is going to return on the console just as a stereo pair with left and right panning. Well, if I scroll over here, I've got another, this is a delay in chamber, and I believe that the next ones are just duplicates of that I use for my house, vintage reverb, delay in chamber. So nothing too exciting right there. I'm going to go back to the home screen though. And let's go over here to the right and talk about these insert effects. These become much more personalized, if you will, to how you mix and how you use them. So this is where this console becomes really powerful. These insert effects could be set up as stereo. So if I switch this around, you'll see I can get a stereo de-esser, which means that I could affect a stereo pair or a dual de-esser. Okay, dual de-esser gives me the ability to have a de-esser for 2 input channels. So as an example, I have channel 12, which is my pastor's mic, running on the left side, if you will, of this effect. And then I have a handheld mic, which is going to the right side, channel 12, channel 13. So if I hit edit, now what I've got the ability to see here is I've got pastor mic, which is channel 12, and then I have handheld, which is channel 13. You can see in this little icon in here, these are not linked. So I'm going to go back and just change this to the stereo de-esser. I'm going to set it. I'm going to go to the edit button, and now you can see that the icon is linking left and right. Okay, go back here, change this to dual de-esser where it was. Now you can see that they have kind of an A channel and a B channel, a left side and a right side, but it's 2 mono inputs. Then down here you have 2 encoders for this A side, 2 encoders for the B side, and you can adjust your settings. This is a low setting, and then we also have a high band setting to pull out. You can do some research on what exactly the low and the high do, but they are preset certain frequency ranges that are naturally resonant that we might want to remove. All right, so if I go back to the home screen here, the next thing that we're going to do is you see that there are 2 insert buttons here, that one and that one. So once we've made our selections, let's look at this next one. Let's say that we wanted to add some drive into our bass guitar. So I might come back here and they have stereo tube stage amp. I'm going to do dual tube stage amp because my bass guitar is just a mono signal. So I'm going to set that. Now I'm going to come over here, and my bass guitar is on channel 7. So I'm going to go all the way back past the buses down to the channels, find channel 7. I'm going to push that, and then I'll push the insert button. So here now channel 7 is set up and inserted in my bass guitar. I could then hit the edit button, and you'll see that bass is set up on that A side. And so all of these controls now are for the A side. You can see we've even got a bunch of windows down here, A side, A side. Now if I go down one more, you'll see it switch from A over to B. See that? Now it says B. And so we've got 2 window pages for B. But we could make our changes, how much drive you want, harmonics, odd harmonics. It's got so many features in here. It's really a great tool. But the last thing I want to show you now, I'm going to select my bass channel, and I'm going to come over here to the home screen. And what we're going to see is we've got a couple features up here since we're looking at the screen. All right. So right now the signal comes in, hits our input meter, input gain. It goes through the low cut. Then if we had a gate on there, it would go to gate, then EQ, then compressor, and then insert. You see INS there, that's insert. We can use this, there's a little icon here, a little encoder that allows us to move it post these or pre these. So EQ and dynamic being our onboard effects, we can do it pre-effects, onboard effects, or post these onboard effects. Do you see how that moves? So I can also turn the insert off right here and not insert it. So then it would just bypass that tube amp, but push it here. And then after that, again, all of these effects, because this is an insert effect, all of these effects, that drive included, is going to go out to any of my bus sends, any of my other locations that I'm sending the signal. So be wise about how you use that, and you can feel free to play around with where you like to have that insert effect. These are great things to mess with, by the way, in your DAW. Practicing with multi-track recordings and practicing in a DAW will really let you fine-tune and refine your process for how you like to mix. All right, so on the right-hand side, we talked about send and return effects, and my bus 13 was linked to a vintage reverb, so I can select that. I can hit sends on fader in the middle of the screen here, and now I have the ability to use my input channels that I can build a mix. This mix will go not to the main output, but it's going to just go to this one bus. That bus then sends it out to the reverb, and then we have to get that signal back into the console on some channels. So I'm going to turn sends on fader off. And on this third layer over here, way down over here, when I push that, now I have some effects returns right here. These are pre-labeled effects left and right for 1, effects 2 left and right, 3 left and right, 4 left and right, because you have 4 stereo returns. And this is where we can determine how much comes back into our mix. Also, if we select this return, we can determine where we want this to go. So stereo bus is not selected right now. If it's orange, then it's on, and that means that this return would go all the way over to my house mix and my main output. But I have it turned off because these 2 red effects are specific to the stream for me. So this is a reverb, this is a delay, specific to the stream. Now these are also reverb and delay, but you'll see that these are set to go to my house because I use 2 for the house, 2 for the stream. Okay, now I'm going to do another video about how you can utilize these auxiliary inputs over here on the far left. A lot of times we just use them for PC inputs. They actually have some connections on the back of the console that would allow you to utilize some sending of a mix to an auxiliary, which would give you an ability to add an outboard effect, and then you could bring that back in here through a stereo pair. You've got 4 mono inputs. You've got a lot of flexibility you can do with this console for sending and returning for effects. But what I'm going to talk about in the next video is how to use a DAW to build some effects as an effect rack that's to use live for mixing with front of house, but maybe you feel limited by the effects that are in this console and you want some different reverbs, different delays, or you've built some really nice setups in your DAW. You can then send them through USB, return them through USB right into some of these auxiliary inputs, but we'll talk about that in the next video. Let's wrap up with this one now. I almost forgot the best practices part, so let me load a different scene here. Go back up to this one. All right, so this scene is the live stream front of house scene that we use at my church, and I want to kind of walk through really quickly how this is all set up. This may warrant a whole other video about this scene that I'm using. It's very similar to the post fader aux mix, the 2 mixes with 1 engineer video that I did a while back, but here's what I've got. So in terms of effects, if we go back to Effects Home, like we've talked about, I have, and you can't see this, but I'll just tell you, I've got a vintage reverb for my live stream. I have a delay and chamber for my live stream. Then I have a vintage reverb for my room, a delay and chamber for my room. Next, I do have the dual de-esser, and that is set up de-essing my pastor's mic and my handheld mic, so that stuff is the same. Then we skip. I've got a sub-octave thing that I was messing around with. We're not using that actually. You can see that it's not inserted. The next one down though, if I push this down here, we have a dual Ultimo compressor. This is very similar to an 1176 type emulation, which is a great compressor. You see that that's on channel 14 and 15. So I'm using that, my channel 14 is my male vocal, my male lead, and then I also have a female lead, which is on 15. So if we look at that real quick from a home screen perspective, you can see that I'm coming in, I'm hitting the onboard EQ, I'm hitting the onboard compressor, then I'm going to another compressor. I'm going to that Ultimo compressor. So this first compressor is a very fast attack, very fast release. It's knocking down a lot of the quick peaks, and then the Ultimo compressor is really adding the character and quality with compression back into that vocal. All right, back to the effects window, back to the effects home. The last thing I've got down here, a bus 11 and 12, is my live stream, and that's my precision limiter that I'm using inserted onto my live stream. So think about this. My live stream is a bus, which is over here, bus 11 and 12. So when I hit select and I hit sends on fader, now all of this is my live stream mix. It's a post fader mix. So it starts out based on this front of house mix, and then we make some alterations. You can see that these kind of have a little ebb and flow to them, but they are mostly pretty even across the board. But these are the alterations that I need for my live stream mix. So my live stream is a stereo paired of buses. Now when I take this, remember that this, if I hit the home screen, this bus is a stereo pair. I have onboard effects. So I have some EQing that I've done for my live stream, slight compression that I've done for my live stream. Then at the very end, I've inserted a limiter. This is a stereo limiter, and I'm using both sides, both A and B match, and that's for the live stream. So if you do any mixing in a DAW and you're doing some mastering, this is pretty standard mastering. You're going to add probably some EQ, some compression, and some limiting to get it up to a broadcast level. So if I jump back over here and I hit the effects screen, you can see that I do have stereo link turned on. This is turned off, but this is turned on. That means that both sides of this limiter, you can see, are matching based on the little icon there. And they are in fact inserted. So there's various ways you can use insert effects. They don't have to just be on the input side of things. You can do buses with insert effects. You also have the ability, because you've got a built-in EQ and compressor on every aux channel, you've got the ability to do some great refinements over there as well. All right, I'm going to turn sends on fader off. The last thing I'm going to recommend, if I come down here to my effects returns, you'll see right now this effects 2 return is a delay and effects 4 return is delay. Use your mute groups. When your worship leader is talking and you've got a delay on, it's really obnoxious. So I have a mute group 6, which is set up just for muting those two effects. That mutes it in my live stream and in my house all at the same time with a quick push of a button, because I'm never looking at this screen while I'm mixing. I'm on my DCAs and I'm on my layers over here for my instruments and my inputs. So I can quickly just hit this mute group 6 and know that that's going to mute my delays. All right, one last best practice. That's really hard to say. One last best practice tip I'll give you is using DCAs to control your effects. So you could set up this DCA to be on the effects returns or the effects send. For me, I typically will take my buses, I'll take my buses here, and if I hold down my delay, then that is affecting the signal going, the amount of signal going into my effect. So my mute group is going to mute my return, but this is going to determine the volume of the mix that goes into this effect. You could, though, set it up to be on the return side, and you could use this DCA to effectively control where this fader goes up or down with one DCA in your easy mix setup. So you see I have reverb and I have delay. If I need a little bit more reverb, I can push the reverb up. The delay, I can push the delay up, or I can turn it down, or I have my quick mute groups over here. All right, that's it for the tips. All right, that's the quickest I can make this video about insert and send and return effects. I hope you found it helpful and valuable. If you did, make sure to hit the thumbs up button. That's gonna help other people find this information as well. Like normal, hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell so that you know when these videos come out. But listen, more importantly, share this video. If you've got somebody else that you know could use this information, feel free to send this link to them and help them out as well. If you've got questions, toss those in the comments below. I'm always in the comment section. I'm happy to help you out there. But I hope this helps you on your mixing journey. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.